Hi, this is a quick video to step us through how to build a very simple tic-tac-toe game in Java. The goal of this is just to create a little text-based game, nothing involving graphics or anything like that. If we look at what I have on my screen right now, you can see a classic game of X's and O's. Okay, and in here, the idea is that each player places either an X or an O in any of the open squares until one of them gets 3 in a row. If one of them gets 3 in a row, then they win. So if we wanted to create this in Java, we need to look at the type of environment we have. So here, when I look at this, what I see is I see 3 potential boxes that can hold a character or a char object. And so I have like an array here, right? Then I could also have another array. That's like the first row. Second row, I also have the idea of an array because I have three cells that could hold characters. And then again, here in this third row, I could do the same thing again. And I could look at it, if I have 3 rows of arrays, maybe I could just build a 2-dimensional array to hold it all into one game. Yeah? And if I were to do that, really what I would have is I'd have this sort of array addressing scheme. They would look like, here's my row numbers, right? Row is always the first number, and then my column's the second number. And with that, if you think about gameplay, if a player wanted to pick a place that they could go, all they would do is find an open cell, and they'd type in, I'll take position 1, 1. So if I know whether they're an X or an O, and if I know what position they want to take, if it's a valid position, then I can add them to the array. And then each time I add a move to the array, I'll check all the possible scenarios to see if they are now the winner. So let's take a look at how we might build this in Java. I'm going to build a new application here. Call it TicTacToe. So the first thing I'm going to build is actually the game board itself. So I keep this as a separate class just because I want the idea of the game board. It should know which positions are currently available, which ones are not. It should be able to check if there's a winner. It should be able to update itself. So it's its own entity, really. So I want to keep it as its own class so I can keep track of things in a nice clean way. So if I look at my game board, the first thing I know that I need to store is I need to actually store the board itself, right? This 3x3 grid. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to make it a private variable, so only game board methods can update it. We're storing either X's or O's, so I'm going to initiate it with the char data type because that holds a single character. And because it's a 2-dimensional array, I need to put in 2 sets of these square brackets. And we need to give it a name, just like any other variable or object. We need to give it a name, so let's just call it the game board. Now the next thing, we need a constructor, right? If we're going to be able to use our game board, we need to be able to call it. So I'm going to say public game board, and in here I'm going to say, so my data type is a char, and it's a 3x3 array. And by default, char characters get what's called the null character. And the null with chars can be a little challenging to test for. So what I want to do is I'm going to initialize all of my positions in the array to have a space. You can't really see it; it looks like it's empty, but it's something that I can easily test for. So I'm going to set up a loop here that'll go over each row. And inside of here, I'm going to use the arrays class. Actually has quite a few methods available to it. So I'm going to use one here that will fill a character array. So I'm going to say the game board at row, and I'm going to fill it with just a blank space. So what this will do is it'll go first time through, it'll look at row 0 and it'll fill this array, this one row, with spaces. And the next time through, it'll be row 1. So anything with a 1 here is now going to get a space. So it'll initialize to be all spaces. So let's just add a nice little comment here. Okay. I'm a very visual person. Everyone has their own coding styles. I'm pretty visual, so I always like to see how things are progressing. So the next thing I'm going to build is a way to see my game board. So let's say this method. So in order to display this game board, really what I need to do is I need to look at, well, what's in this first cell? Then I need to do something to divide, to make like a little space, and then put whatever's in the next cell, and then a space, or a line, and then whatever's in that third cell. Then I need to draw a line, and then I need to check what's in the next row. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to set up 2 loops. One is going to loop me through each of my rows, and the other will look down each column. So at row 0, show me column 0, then 1, then 2. So let's do that next. And then I want to go, so this will iterate me over each of the columns, or each of the rows. Now I want to do each of the columns. So I'm going to say columns. Okay, so each time I get to the cell, I want to print the contents of the cell, first and foremost. So I'm going to say system. Okay, so if it's basically a 0 or a 1 now, I want to print this bar. If it's a 2, then I don't want to print the bar. So let's take a look at that. So if column is equal to 0 or column is equal to 1, let's just print a little vertical bar there. And then when it gets to the end of the row, I want to print a horizontal bar. So system.out print. So you see here's the end of my loop that goes over the column. So when I get to the end of my column, let's just print out something like that. So we do a new line and another new line. Let's see how this looks. Oops. Of course, we can't see it just yet. So let's go into our main class here. Okay. So we'll create a new game board. Call it my game. And display the board. So let's see what it gives us. Oh, it's pretty ugly. All right, so maybe what we can do is we'll make our game board a little prettier. So let's add in some tab spacing, right? So that these will have a little more generous space between them. And let's reduce the length of this line because we don't need it to be quite this big. Let's try run that again. Better, but still not great. All right. Just not loving it. Okay, this is sort of what we're thinking. So here we have a 3x3 grid, and I guess when we get to that last row, I don't want to print this. It gets confusing. So there's the last thing we need to check. So if row is equal to 0, or row is equal to 1, print a nice line. Otherwise, actually, I don't even think I need anything else but that. Alright, hopefully that's it for our display method. Okay, it's not beautiful, but it's certainly sufficient. So if I was playing the actual game, what I would need to do is the first player would pick one of these cells. So I need to know whether or not it's an X or an O, and I need to know the row and column that the player wishes to choose. So if I look at that, let's say the first player is O and they choose position 0, 0. So, really what I would have is I'd have something like, my game, make a move, player O chooses position 0, 0. It would have to look something like that. So let's go into our game board class here and create. Okay. So this method will validate if a player's move is allowed and return true if the move was completed. Okay, so say public boolean make move, and we need to pass in a char to represent the player, and we need to put in a row and a column. Okay, so the first thing we need to do is we need to check, was that position available? So for example here, if I went to put in position 0, 0, it should say no. It should say, no, that's not a valid move. So I'm going to say if the game board at position row, position column does not equal the space, right? So if it's not free, then just return false. I don't need to do anything else, right? I know it's not a valid move. Otherwise, it should be a valid move. Well, I guess I should also validate if it's inside the bounds of our array. So if row is greater than 0 and row is less than or equal to 2, okay. So if that's all true, okay. All right, so if we know that it's an available space, then what we can do is we can say the game board at position row column is equal to the player. Right? So if we passed in an O. Okay, so here we've just added the end of the make move. So we validate that it's within the game board, and then we make sure that it's an open space, and if it is, then we say, yep, that's a valid move, and we set to whatever character X or O that the player is, right? That gets passed in. If any of those other things come about, then we return false. So we need to return true that's a valid state. Okay. So that's the end of our make move method. So let's just add a little comment there. The make move. So I like to build a little, test a little. Let's take a look at our actual tic-tac-toe game. So if I were to manually add an O, will it work? Oh, created an O, but didn't display what I had hoped, did it? What's going on there? Maybe when this is all done, we need to do a new line. Okay, let's try that again. Okay, so if we do that again, it's going in the right spot. It's just a little ugly how it's displaying. We can make that. We'll make that look better over time. So it looks like I can add in characters where I want them. So if I were to simulate playing a game, so there I have my O's in 0, 0, my X's in 1, 1. Okay, so this is working. It's doing what we need. So then, even though it's certainly not pretty, we'll clean that all up at the end. So what we really need to do now is we need to create a game state where we're going to keep asking for if the game should continue while no one wins or while there's still space to move. So to do that, I'm going to say while, it's a good name for our method here, while game is active. So while we have an active game, so I'll say my game So let's see here. So while we've got the active game, for now I'm just going to return true. So this method will check if there is space on the game board and if anyone has won the game. Will return true if the game actually let's make that a private variable up top here. So I'm going to say private boolean game on going. Okay. So while my game.game active, why isn't that updating? So we're going to return game ongoing. So you see I'm moving around a fair bit here. This is very natural when doing your coding. So if you find yourself doing the same, don't worry about it. Okay, so while the game is active, I'm going to check to see if the counter is divisible by 2. If it's equally divisible by 2, then I'll say it's player player X's turn. So what we'll do is we'll say my game dot So what we're just going to do is we're going to pass in either an O or an X, meaning we either want player O to go or player X to go. And every time we go through this loop, it's going to flip between X's and O's. So now I need to make a method called askPlayer. Right? And this is going to ask the player which position that they want to move into. So this method will ask the user a row and column, validate the inputs, and call the method make move. Okay. And I don't love having a method call a method, but I think this is fine for now, for the purposes of this game anyways. So this is called game active. Okay, so public sorry, it's not called game active, it's called askPlayer. And we pass in player either an X or an O. So I'm going to do so to ask the player for input, we need to look at the key. We need a scanner object. So put in a new scanner. Okay. So we're going to give a prompt. Okay. Hey, how are you? Okay, so here we're going to get input, and really what we need to do is we need to validate, is this a valid row, is this a valid column? So I'm going to create a method called notValid, and I'm going to pass in the row and the column information. And what this will do is, so it's going to check if it's basically between 1 and 3. If it is, great. Then I'll keep asking. Otherwise, I'm going to call the method makeMove. So now I can say makeMove player, row, and column. So let's make this my return type is going to be Boolean, right? So if it evaluates to true, it's not a valid thing, then it'll keep asking. Okay, so public Boolean, and then here, what do we call it? Not valid. So it's greater than 3. Or row is less than 1, return false. Actually, yeah. Right, so I'll check for these two states. If it's greater than 3 or less than 1, and I'll just automatically return false. Otherwise, it'll return true. Actually, I got that backwards. Because we're checking that if it's not valid. Okay. So here we've got the moves. We've got a little validator here, so we still don't have the ability to check if our game is over. But let's go back here to TicTacToe. Let's just see what. I'm gonna put a couple lines in between each of these. Okay, let's play the game here and see what it looks like. So one thing I can see is it doesn't actually show which player is it. It just says please enter a row 1 to 3. So I don't even know. That's something that definitely we should incorporate into when we're asking, right? So let's go to our method where we're ask player here. So here, let's do this. Say player right, so I put a placeholder here for the player. So if it's an X, it's going to say player X. Please enter a row, or it's going to say player O. And let's do the same thing down here. Okay, so we'll stop running this one. Let's test again. Okay, so there's our empty grid. Player X, please enter a row. So let's go in position 1, 1. It didn't redisplay the game board, so I can't see where things are at. So what I should do is maybe I'll move these inside of my while statement. Okay, so here we're either going to ask player O to make a move or player X to make a move, and then we're going to display the board. So let's try that again. Okay, so we've got our empty board. If I pick position 1, 1, I end up here. But remember, to the player, this is row 1, and this is column 1. They don't start counting at 0, right? Computers do, but people don't. So we're going to need to account for that when we call the make move method. So let's go back into our game board here, And let's adjust it to make it a little more friendly for people. So let's see. Where do we ask the player for their move? Here we go. Okay, so here we say make a move. And they've given us a row and column based on counting from 1. So what we really need to do is we need to take 1 off of each of those, right? So this way, even though inside of the computer we're counting from 0, people are going to count from 1. So, so this is column 1 to a human, and this is row 1. We would never say it's row 0. So make that little adjustment there so that we're 0 counting when we make a move. All right. Let's go back and try it again. So now if I pick position 1, 1, puts an X in the upper spot there. And then if my O character goes, maybe they pick position 2, 2. So you can see how the game could play. Row 1, column 1. So what happened there was that wasn't a valid move, but we've still gone to the X. We've still gone to player X. So we need to build some logic in there to make sure that that can't happen. So if that position's already filled, I should ask to go again. So let's look at where we make a move. So make move, the method make move, it returns a Boolean, right? So if it returns false, I should go again. Okay. So here we keep asking. Okay, I'm back. I had a quick interruption there. So what I did is when I was just before my interruption, I had we were having that problem where a user could go on the same position as another user. So I had to think about that. I thought, well, there's something wrong with how I'm validating if a position's available to be worked on. So what I've done is I've made a slight update to the code. And so let's go back and see how this works now. So when we call the method askAPlayer, right? It's just going to ask a player to make a move. All we need is the player's character, either X or O. And then what we're going to do is, well, we have invalid row and columns. Okay, so if the user gives us a row and column that's either already taken or is outside of our game board, then we're going to ask them to enter the row and column again, and we'll keep asking them until they give us a valid row and column. So let's take a look at that. So I said, whatever your player name, X or O, please enter a row 1 to 3, and we store that in row. And then I ask the player to enter a column 1 to 3, and we store that in column. So then I call a method that says not valid row and column. So the idea here is, while I have an invalid row and column, keep going through my loop. So let's take a look at the method not valid. So I go down here, and in here it says this method will validate if the row and column are between 1 and 3. And this is what I was missing. And if the position is currently empty. So I made just a very simple if statement. I said if row is greater than 3, or if row is less than 1. Remember, with or, as long as any of these evaluate to true, they're all it'll return this whole thing will evaluate to true. So I check if it's between 1 and 3 for the rows, and I check if it's between 1 and 3 for the columns. And I said, or if it is not, remember the exclamation mark means not, if it is not empty. So I check to see if there's already something in that row, or in that cell. So here is the method is empty. I get a row and column, and then I just check if it's equal to a space or not. If it is, I return true, it's empty. Otherwise, I say that position's already taken, and I return false. So if any of these return true, it's an invalid choice that the player has made. So we return true So in this do while loop, this evaluates to true, which means we go through the loop again. So let's give that a try. So here we have our empty game board. I'm going to pick position 1, 1, this upper corner here. So it puts an X in there for me. Now, if I want to do the same thing with O, I want to try to put O in the same spot. Let's see if it fails. It says that position is taken. So what happens if I put in a 4 and a 2? It didn't give me a lot of feedback, but it basically says, please enter a row. So it looks like it's working. Now the problem here is, let's go 3, 3. So let's make O win. 3, 2. Now O should have won, the game should have stopped, but it didn't, right? We have 3 in a row. So we don't have any logic right now for whether or not the game is complete. So let's go back to our game board and let's think about this. Now, if this is our game board, if we're playing it normally, you know, my eyes just say, well, that middle row is 3 in a row. But to a computer, I need to tell it explicitly how I check in my mind. So I'm going to look and see if that first row is indeed all the same characters, X's or O's. I don't even care if as long as it's X's or O's and there's 3 in a row, you win. So if I look at the numbering sequence here, if I compare position 0 with position 1 with position 2, if they're all the same, then I know that there's a win. If they're not, I can check the next row. Because the only thing that changes here is a 1. So I can easily go over all of the rows with a for loop. And then I could, let's write that. So let's horizontally check. Let's check if all the rows are the same. So we'll make move, and then after a person makes a move, right? So after they make a move, we display the game board. Let's check for winner. Let's make a method to check for the winner. Okay, so public boolean. And what did we call it? Check for winner. Okay, so I want to check, so if game board at the row and position 0, whoops, is equal to the game board at the row and position 1, if those are the same, and okay, so here I'm checking if position 0 is the same as position 1. And if position 1 is the same as position 2, right? So that's like saying position 0 is the same as 1, 1's the same as 2. Okay, so if all of those evaluate to true, and it's not a space, right? So we have all of those. What's it complaining about here? This evaluates to true, and that is true, and do one more check here, and game board at row position 0 does not equal the empty space. So if that is 2, return true. So the idea here is all 3 positions are the same, and then I have to check to make sure it's not the empty space, because then technically there'd be a winner on the very first move, right? So there we have checking the horizontal, right? So now I can do the same thing for the vertical. Loop over each column and check for a winner. So I'm going to copy the logic because it's pretty much the same. The difference is now it's row 0 and column. Because the rows are what's changing this time, or the columns are what's changing. Okay, so this time we're going to check if these are all the same. So you see how the column 0, 0, 0, 1, 1, 1, 2, 2, 2. So that's the same thing here, right? Those columns. So we're going to iterate over those columns. So if that's all the same, then we return true. Okay, and then check the diagonals. Diagonals. Still feels like I spelled that wrong. Let's check the crosses. Okay, so here I really want to, I'm checking 0, 0, 1, 1, 2, 2, 2, 0, 1, 1, 0, 2. Those are the other options, right? So if game board at 0, 0 is equal to right? So if 0, 0 is equal to 1, 1, and 1, 1 is equal to 2, 2, so these two are the same, these two are the same, and so if that's true, I'll copy this. So now we need, so then if we look at this, now I'm going to go 2, 0, 1, 1, 0, 2. So 2, 0, oops, 1, 1, and then 0, 2. Okay. And otherwise, if none of those are true, then we just return false. All right. So now we actually have a way to check it. So let's save, go back, check for a winner. So let's let X win this one. Okay, so X just won it, but we didn't really do anything when they did. So let's take a look at how we, so here I check for winner, but I don't do anything if we win. So if any of those are true, really what we should do is change change our game on going to false, right? That's actually probably a better way to handle this. So check for winner. So if that is true, this is really what we need to, really what we should have done. Actually, I'll even do one little bit better. I'll say, so if this is true, system.out.print, the winner is why is this complaining here? Oh, I don't know why I did that. There we go. Okay. This is what we're going to print if any of these statements are true. Okay, so just doing final updates here. Check the crosses. So let's do position 0, 0. And do 1, 1. Okay. So now we should be finally at a place where we can play our game. There it is. The winner is X. So hopefully that helped you. So there you have it. Hope you have a, oh, you know what? It just occurred to me, there's one thing left. What happens if there's a stalemate? So if we get to 9, right? If there's 9 moves made, we shouldn't keep going, right? So, so after the first move, that'll go to 2. All right, so if this ever gets to 10, we filled the board. So, counter gets to 10. Stalemate. All right, good stuff. So that's the end of our video. Thanks for sharing, or thanks for joining. Okay, so just doing final updates here. Check the crosses. So let's do position 0, 0. And do 1, 1. Okay. So now we should be finally at a place where we can play our game. There it is. The winner is X. So hopefully that helped you. I purposely showed you a little bit of the developmental process there, where we're going back and forth and we're changing things, we're modifying, we're building a little, testing a little. It's a really progressive approach to build a little and test a little, because then it's a lot easier to make modifications. So if you think about like that display, how many times did we go back and change it through the video? Quite a few. And if I look at my main method now, the goal here is to keep your main method fairly clean. So while we have an active game, it's either player O's move or player X's move. And really we just display the board, check for a winner. And if there's no winner, keep going, keep going. So there you have it. Hope you have oh, you know what? It just occurred to me, there's one thing left. What happens if there's a stalemate? So if we get to 9, right? If there's 9 moves made, we shouldn't keep going, right? So, so after the first move, that'll go to 2. All right. So if this ever gets to 10, we filled the board. So. Counter gets to 10. Stalemate. All right, good stuff. So that's the end of our video. Thanks for sharing, or thanks for joining.